He moved faster than the camera could capture, and died before anyone could understand him. Bruce Lee was more than an actor, more than a fighter. He was a force, a blur of energy, intellect, and rebellion. The man who brought the East to the West, who made martial arts not just a skill, but a philosophy. And yet, at 32 years old, he was gone. The world called it an accident. Doctors said it was a reaction to painkillers. But few believed that. How could the fittest man alive, the man whose body seemed carved from perfection, die without warning? In July 1973, Bruce Lee collapsed in Hong Kong. By the time help arrived, it was too late. His heart had stopped. His body, the very symbol of human potential, had betrayed him. But what really happened that night has never been fully explained. Some blamed exhaustion. Some whispered about secret injuries, mysterious allergies, even curses. And as his legend grew, so did the theories, the triads, the CIA, the supernatural, the Lee family curse. But the truth may be simpler and darker. Because Bruce Lee wasn't just fighting opponents. He was fighting systems, racial barriers, cultural expectations, studio politics, and a Hollywood that didn't know what to do with an Asian man who refused to bow. He changed the world in a few short years, and the world took him back too soon. Everyone knows Bruce Lee, the fighter. Few know Bruce Lee, the human being, the dreamer, the philosopher, the man who saw too far ahead of his time. And maybe that's why, decades later, the world is still trying to explain him. Long before the legend, there was a boy restless, sharp-eyed, impossible to contain. Lee Jun-fan, born in San Francisco, 1940, under the sign of the Dragon. His parents were visiting from Hong Kong with a touring Cantonese opera troupe when he entered the world, a coincidence that would later feel like destiny. The name they gave him, Bruce, came from the nurse who delivered him. The name Jun-fan meant, return again. When the family moved back to Hong Kong, Bruce grew up in the shadow of war. Japanese occupation had left the city scarred, hungry, and angry. He learned early what struggle meant, not as an idea, but as a daily reality. His father, Lee Hoi-chuen, was an actor in Cantonese opera, and young Bruce followed him onto movie sets as a child. By age 10, he had already appeared in several films. But beneath that mischievous grin, he was a kid who fought a lot. Street fights, school fights, challenges from gangs. Hong Kong was rough, and Bruce refused to be afraid. At 18, his mother, worried he'd get killed, sent him back to America with just $100 in his pocket. He landed in Seattle, working as a dishwasher, attending high school by day, and teaching martial arts by night. He called it Jeet Kune Do, the way of the intercepting fist. But to Bruce, it wasn't just fighting. It was philosophy, a way of life built around freedom, flow, and adaptability. He studied philosophy at the University of Washington, reading everything from Lao Tzu to Nietzsche. To him, martial arts was not about violence, it was about self-knowledge. Knowing is not enough, he wrote. We must apply. Willing is not enough. We must do. By the mid-1960s, he had opened his first schools in Seattle, Oakland, and Los Angeles. His students weren't just martial artists, they were actors, athletes, and outsiders drawn to his energy. Among them were Steve McQueen, James Coburn, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. They didn't see him as a teacher, they saw him as a revelation. But Hollywood didn't. When he auditioned for the TV series Kung Fu, executives told him he was too Asian for the role, a role written about an Asian monk. They gave it instead to David Carradine, a white actor. Bruce was furious. He once said, "They want me to play an extra in my own story." So he went home, back to Hong Kong, and there, everything changed. In Hong Kong, Bruce wasn't a side character. He was the story. His first film, The Big Boss 1971, broke box office records. Then came Fist of Fury 1972, where he played a man who stood up to colonial oppression, a metaphor for everything Bruce himself had fought against. Audiences didn't just cheer, they roared. He wasn't just a movie star. He was a movement. For the first time, an Asian man wasn't being laughed at or made small. He was the hero, the fighter, the symbol of pride. Bruce Lee was no longer trying to prove himself. He was trying to change the world's idea of what strength looked like. But as his fame exploded, so did the pressure. Hollywood came back calling, desperate now to profit from the man they had once rejected. Bruce said yes, but this time it would be on his terms. He would make one final film, one that would bring East and West together. It would be called Enter the Dragon, and it would make him immortal. By 1972, Bruce Lee was no longer a man chasing opportunity, he was the opportunity In just 2 years, he had transformed from a struggling actor into Asia's biggest star, commanding crowds that filled entire city blocks. Everywhere he went, chaos followed, fans clawed at his car, police escorted him through airports, and reporters begged to understand how one man had done what an entire generation of actors couldn't: make the world take Asian power seriously. And Bruce Lee wasn't finished. He had already rewritten martial arts on film, the grace, the speed, the philosophy behind every movement. But what he wanted now was to bridge two worlds, East and West. He wanted to show Hollywood that Chinese heroes didn't have to bow, they could lead. When Warner Brothers came knocking, Bruce finally had his chance. The film was Enter the Dragon, a co-production between Hong Kong's Golden Harvest and an American studio. For the first time, he would be the main star of a Hollywood movie. He wrote, choreographed, and fought for every frame of it, literally. His body was perfection sculpted through obsession. 135 pounds of speed and precision. He trained 6 hours a day, blending philosophy with motion. He told students, "Be water, my friend." It wasn't just a metaphor. It was his truth to flow around obstacles, to move through life with adaptability and strength. But behind the discipline, Bruce's body was beginning to show signs of something darker. In May 1973, during an overdubbing session for Enter the Dragon, he suddenly collapsed. His body convulsed, his temperature spiked. Doctors called it cerebral edema, swelling of the brain. They revived him, told him to rest, and blamed it on exhaustion and heat. Bruce brushed it off. He had a film to finish. Weeks later, he was back on set, smiling, sparring, unstoppable. The pressure was unimaginable, a cultural revolution resting on one man's shoulders. He was rewriting how the world saw Asian men, and he knew it. Friends later said he seemed haunted, awake at all hours, constantly training, pushing himself past human limits. Then came the 20th of July, 1973. Bruce was in Hong Kong, visiting actress Betty Ting Pei to discuss a script. He complained of a headache, took a painkiller Equigesic, and lay down. He never got up again. By the time doctors arrived, he was gone. 32 years old. Healthy, powerful, eternal. The official cause of death: cerebral edema due to an allergic reaction to the medication. But that explanation never satisfied anyone. How could a man who defied biology die from a simple painkiller? How could the strongest body in cinema stop without warning? Rumors exploded overnight. Some said it was heat stroke. Others whispered poison, triad revenge, even government conspiracy. And among his superstitious fans, one theory took hold: the Lee family curse. Because Bruce wasn't the first Lee to die young, and he wouldn't be the last. But before the world could even process his death, Enter the Dragon was released. It became one of the most successful martial arts films in history, turning Bruce Lee into a global icon and his death into a myth that refused to fade. He had dreamed of becoming immortal through his art. He succeeded, just not the way he intended. The boy from Hong Kong had conquered the world, but the price was everything he had left to give. When the news broke Bruce Lee is dead, the world refused to believe it. How could the strongest man alive, a symbol of human perfection, simply collapse and die in his sleep? The official cause, cerebral edema, brain swelling, was vague, convenient. Doctors in Hong Kong attributed it to an allergic reaction to a painkiller called Equigesic. But the inconsistencies in the report only deepened suspicion. There were no drugs, no alcohol, no sign of trauma. Just silence and a mystery that's never been solved. In the days that followed, rumors spread faster than truth. Some whispered that the Triads, Hong Kong's criminal underworld, had targeted him for refusing protection money. Others claimed he'd been poisoned by a jealous rival in the martial arts world. There were even stories that Chinese secret societies saw him as a threat, a man bringing too much attention to sacred traditions. But perhaps the strangest theory was the one that refused to die: the Lee family curse. Decades earlier, Bruce's parents had reportedly disguised him as a girl when he was born, dressing him in women's clothes, giving him a girl's name to ward off evil spirits. Chinese superstition held that male children born under the dragon sign invited the jealousy of demons. His sudden death, at 32, seemed to confirm it for those who believed in fate. Then, 20 years later, the myth became prophecy. In 1993, Bruce's son, Brandon Lee, was killed on the set of The Crow, shot by a real bullet from what was supposed to be a prop gun. He was 28, just 4 years younger than his father. Same family, same age, same eerie circumstances. People stopped calling it coincidence. But the truth, as always, might be more human, and more tragic. In his final months, Bruce was pushing himself beyond endurance. Friends said he barely ate, barely slept, and trained until his body shook. He was working under extreme heat, performing intense stunts, and maintaining a diet of protein shakes and supplements. One close friend, Raymond Chow, believed his body simply gave out. Even Bruce himself seemed to sense something was coming. In interviews, he spoke about death, often not with fear, but with understanding. "The key to immortality is first living a life worth remembering," he said. He had always believed the body was a vessel, a tool for expression, but maybe even he underestimated how fragile that vessel could be. When Enter the Dragon premiered weeks after his death, audiences were electrified. It was more than a film, it was resurrection. The roar of the crowd, the tears, the disbelief, all of it turned Bruce Lee into something more than human. He had become myth, symbol, legend. But that's the tragedy of Bruce Lee. The more immortal he became, the less the world remembered the man. The philosopher who wrote late into the night, the father who told bedtime stories to his children, the thinker who believed martial arts was about peace, not violence, the fighter who never truly fought anyone except himself. And in that battle between body and spirit, between legend and man, even Bruce Lee could not win forever. From this channel's perspective, Bruce Lee was not just an icon of martial arts, he was a cultural earthquake. He didn't simply kick through wooden boards, he kicked through centuries of stereotypes. Before Bruce Lee, Hollywood saw Asian men as servants, villains, sidekicks, or silent mystics. He changed that in a single generation. On screen, he wasn't comic relief, he was control, precision, and power. He didn't apologize for his identity, he weaponized it. His body became a declaration. I exist. I am equal. I am more than you imagined. But beyond the fists and philosophy, Bruce Lee's story is a tragedy about how greatness isolates. The world adored his body, but rarely understood his mind. He wanted to be more than a fighter. He was a thinker, a poet, a bridge between cultures. He spoke about oneness, about dissolving the ego, about moving like water, ideas that Western media dismissed as mysticism when they were, in fact, profound psychology. And yet, the deeper truth of Bruce Lee's life is how lonely it was. Hollywood wouldn't cast him because of his race. Hong Kong would question his authenticity because of his Western education. He lived between worlds, never fully accepted by either. Fame brought him worship, but also exhaustion. People didn't see the human behind the muscle. They saw a myth in motion. They saw invincibility. They saw perfection. And in a cruel twist, that illusion became his cage. The man who taught the world to be water died trying to live up to the image of steel. His death reminds us that even the strongest body cannot shield a fragile soul. And maybe that's what made him eternal, not because he was flawless, but because he was fearless. He faced rejection, racism, and relentless physical pressure, and turned it all into movement, into art that still speaks half a century later. Bruce Lee once said, "I am not teaching you how to fight. I am teaching you how to express yourself." That was his real philosophy, not violence, but freedom. Freedom from limits, freedom from labels, freedom from the smallness of other people's expectations. And that's what makes his story so haunting. The world tried to explain Bruce Lee with science, with superstition, with rumor, but maybe he was never meant to be explained. He was meant to be felt. He wasn't the legend they made him into. He was the legend they could never understand. There's a moment slow, silent, eternal in Enter the Dragon. Bruce Lee stands shirtless, blood streaked across his chest, eyes locked on his enemy. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. Every muscle, every breath, every heartbeat says it for him. Power, control, balance. It's not just a scene, it's a prophecy, because that's how the world remembers him, suspended in motion, forever unbroken. 5 decades after his death, Bruce Lee is still here. Not as a ghost, but as a force. Every fighter who steps into a ring, every kid who throws a punch in front of a mirror, every dreamer who refuses to accept limits, they're all moving in his shadow. He didn't just change movies, he changed minds. He taught the world that discipline could be spiritual, that movement could be language, that philosophy could be a weapon. He gave strength to those who were told to stay small, to anyone who ever felt unseen. His body is gone, but his rhythm never stopped. His words echo through time. Be water, my friend. And maybe that was his final lesson, that life is motion, that we bend but do not break, that true immortality isn't living forever, but living fully. Bruce Lee burned too fast, too bright a storm that refused to fade quietly. He left no grand farewell, no final performance, only a silence that still hums with energy. He lived like lightning. He left like thunder. And somewhere, beyond explanation or reason, his spirit still moves not to be understood, but to be felt. Some stories fade with time. His only grows stronger. Some stories were never meant to be known. But now,